Think you know everything about the Winslow family? From a character who vanished into thin air to Steve Urkel's DNA transformation machine, Family Matters hid some seriously bizarre secrets behind its wholesome TGIF facade. Get ready to discover the wild science fiction plots, cast feuds, and production mysteries that made this sitcom far stranger than anyone imagined. Fact 1. Steve Urkel was named after a real person. When Family Matters co-creator Michael Warren was developing the character of Steve Urkel, he decided to name the nerdy neighbor after someone he knew personally. Warren chose to honor his friend, Steve Urkel, a writer and director who had no idea his name would soon become one of the most recognizable in American television history. This seemingly innocent decision to use a real person's name turned into a nightmare for the actual Steve Urkel once the show became a massive hit in the early 1990s. The character's popularity exploded beyond anyone's expectations, and suddenly people across the country were looking up the name Steve Urkel in phone books and directories. Back then, finding someone's phone number was as simple as flipping through the local yellow pages, and fans discovered the real Steve Urkel's contact information with ease. The poor man began receiving thousands of prank phone calls from Family Matters viewers who wanted to talk to the fictional character. Callers would pretend to be Laura Winslow asking for Steve, or they would repeat the character's famous catchphrase, "Did I do that?" over and over again. The constant harassment made Urkel's daily life incredibly difficult, as his phone would ring at all hours with strangers expecting to reach the suspender-wearing nerd from television. The situation became even more complicated when businesses started treating Steve Urkel's real name as suspicious or fake. When he tried to make reservations, apply for services, or conduct normal business transactions, people would assume he was using a made-up name from the popular sitcom. This created endless frustration and embarrassment for someone who had simply been unlucky enough to share his name with a fictional character. Michael Warren later admitted that if he had known Steve Urkel would become such a long-running and beloved character, appearing in over 200 episodes across 9 seasons, he never would have used his friend's real name. The decision that seemed harmless during the character's planned one-episode appearance became a source of regret as Warren watched his friend deal with years of unwanted attention and complications. Fact 2. The show's original theme song was Louis Armstrong. Most people associate Family Matters with the upbeat theme song As Days Go By, but the show actually started with a completely different musical introduction that would surprise modern viewers. When Family Matters premiered on September 22, 1989, the opening credits played over Louis Armstrong's classic jazz standard, "What a Wonderful World," a song that had nothing to do with family sitcoms or the Chicago-based Winslow family. The decision to use Armstrong's 1967 recording was an unusual choice for a family comedy, especially considering that most sitcoms of the era featured original theme songs written specifically for their shows. What a Wonderful World had gained renewed popularity after being featured in the 1987 film Good Morning Vietnam, which helped it climb to number 32 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart when it was reissued in 1988, just 1 year before Family Matters debuted. However, the producers quickly realized that Armstrong's contemplative and somewhat melancholy jazz ballad didn't match the energy and tone they wanted for their new family sitcom. The song's lyrics about seeing trees of green and skies of blue felt disconnected from the urban Chicago setting and the lighthearted adventures of the Winslow family. After just 5 episodes, including the pilot episode titled The Mama Who Came to Dinner, the show's creators decided to make a change. The replacement theme song, As Days Go By, was written specifically for Family Matters by Jesse Frederick, Bennett Salve, and Scott Rome, with Frederick performing the vocals. This new song featured lyrics that directly referenced family life and home, with lines about filling houses with happiness and the bigger love of the family. The custom-written theme matched the show's wholesome family values much better than Armstrong's jazz standard. Interestingly, when Family Matters episodes were later shown in syndication, viewers could still hear, "What a wonderful world" during the pilot episode, creating confusion for fans who remembered the show differently. The original Armstrong theme became a piece of television trivia that most viewers never knew existed, making it one of the shortest-lived theme songs in sitcom history. Fact 3. Judy Winslow disappeared without any explanation. One of the strangest mysteries in television history happened right in front of millions of viewers. Yet most people didn't realize how bizarre it was until years later. Judy Winslow, the youngest member of the Winslow family played by actress Jaime Foxworth, simply vanished from Family Matters after the 19th episode of Season 4 titled Mama's Wedding, and was never seen or mentioned again for the remaining 5 seasons of the show. When Family Matters began in 1989, Carl and Harriet Winslow clearly had 3 children: teenagers Eddie and Laura, plus 9-year-old Judy, who was portrayed as a typical sassy younger sister with her own storylines and character development. For 4 full seasons, Judy appeared regularly in episodes dealing with school problems, sibling rivalries, and the usual challenges of growing up in the Winslow household. The episode Mama's Wedding showed Judy walking down the aisle as a flower girl during the wedding of Carl's mother Estelle to her boyfriend Fletcher. And that appearance became her final moment on the show. When Season 5 premiered, the Winslow family continued their lives as if Judy had never existed, with Carl and Harriet suddenly acting like parents of only 2 children instead of 3. What made this disappearance truly strange was the complete lack of explanation within the show's storyline. Most television series that remove a main character will write them out with some kind of story reason, like the character moving away, going to college, or staying with relatives. Family Matters provided absolutely no acknowledgement that Judy had ever been part of the family, creating a glaring continuity error that confused longtime viewers. The real reason behind Judy's removal was budget considerations and the show's increasing focus on Steve Urkel's character, which left less screen time and storylines for other family members. Producer William Bickley later explained that as the show evolved to feature more expensive plots and set pieces, they needed to make cuts, and Judy's character had the least room to grow within the new direction. Actress Jaime Foxworth learned about her dismissal from other cast members rather than the producers themselves, making the situation even more difficult for the young performer. Fact 4. Stephen Urkel saved Jaleel White's voice. The creation of Stephen Urkel, Steve Urkel's smooth and confident alter ego, wasn't just a creative decision to add drama to Family Matters, but actually served as a medical necessity to protect Jaleel White's physical health. By the time the show reached its 5th season in 1993, White had been performing Steve Urkel's distinctive high-pitched, nasally voice for nearly 4 years, and the constant strain was beginning to cause serious damage to his vocal cords. Steve Urkel's voice was one of the character's most recognizable features, requiring White to speak in a much higher register than his natural speaking voice, while adding the signature nasal quality that made phrases like, "Did I do that?" so memorable. Maintaining this artificial voice for hours during filming sessions, combined with the physical comedy that often required White to shout or express surprise in character, was putting enormous stress on his throat and vocal cords. The show's producers and White himself realized that continuing to perform the Urkel voice without breaks could lead to permanent vocal damage that might end his career or require medical intervention. This practical concern led to the development of Stephen Urkel, introduced in the Season 5 episode Dr. Urkel and Mr. Cool, where Steve uses a transformation chamber and special serum to become his cooler, more confident alter ego. Stephen spoke in Jaleel White's natural voice, allowing the actor to give his strained vocal cords time to rest and recover during scenes where he played the suave character. Executive producer David Duclon later revealed that Stephen was intentionally designed to be essentially Jaleel White being himself, which meant the actor could speak normally and comfortably without the physical stress of the Urkel voice. The character proved so popular with audiences that Stefan returned multiple times throughout the series, eventually becoming a permanent part of the show when Steve created a clone of himself that was permanently transformed into Stefan. This solution allowed White to continue playing Steve Urkel for the remaining seasons while protecting his voice through regular breaks as Stefan, proving that sometimes the most practical solutions can also become the most entertaining storylines. Fact 5. A fraternity made Steve Urkel famous. The transformation of Steve Urkel from a one-time guest character into the breakout star of Family Matters happened because of an unexpected reaction from a group of college students who attended the taping of his debut episode. When 12-year-old Jaleel White first appeared as the nerdy neighbor in the episode Laura's First Date during the show's first season, he was only supposed to make that single appearance and never return to the series. However, during the live studio audience taping of that episode, a fraternity group that had come to watch the filming fell in love with White's portrayal of the awkward, suspender-wearing character. The college students were so entertained by Steve Urkel's antics, distinctive voice, and physical comedy that they couldn't contain their enthusiasm, even when the character wasn't on screen. Throughout the entire taping session, whenever there was a scene that didn't feature Steve Urkel, the fraternity members would start chanting, "Urkel! Urkel!" from their seats in the studio audience. This spontaneous audience participation was completely unplanned and caught everyone involved with the show by surprise, including the cast, crew, and producers who were witnessing this unusual level of excitement for a guest character. The producers and writers had never experienced such a strong and immediate audience reaction to a minor character during their previous work on Family Matters or other sitcoms. Studio audiences typically responded politely to guest stars, but the fraternity's vocal enthusiasm and repeated chanting made it clear that Steve Urkel had struck a chord with viewers in a way that nobody had anticipated. This unexpected audience response during the live taping convinced the show's creators that they had stumbled onto something special with the Steve Urkel character. The fraternity's chanting demonstrated that the character had immediate appeal and entertainment value that could potentially attract viewers and boost ratings if he returned to the show. Based largely on this enthusiastic reaction from the studio audience, the producers decided to bring Jaleel White back as Steve Urkel for additional episodes. What started as a single appearance thanks to some rowdy college students eventually turned into a 9-season run that made Steve Urkel one of the most recognizable characters in television history. Fact 6. Carl Winslow is the same character from multiple movies. Actor Reginald VelJohnson became so strongly associated with playing police officers that fans have developed an elaborate theory connecting all of his law enforcement roles into one continuous character arc spanning multiple movies and television shows. Between 1984 and 1998, VelJohnson portrayed police officers in Ghostbusters, Die Hard, Die Hard 2, Turner and Hooch, and Family Matters, leading creative viewers to wonder if these were all the same person at different points in his career. The theory suggests that VelJohnson's character begins as a corrections officer in Ghostbusters in 1984, where he witnesses supernatural events that traumatize him and influence his later behavior. According to this fan interpretation, the character then moves to Los Angeles and becomes Sergeant Al Powell in Die Hard, the desk-bound officer who helps John McClane during the Nakatomi Plaza crisis. The theory explains that Powell's reluctance to use his weapon, which is revealed as a plot point in Die Hard, stems from his earlier experiences with the paranormal events in New York. After the dangerous situations in Los Angeles, the theory continues. The character relocates to a safer location and becomes Carl Winslow, a Chicago police officer trying to live a quiet family life in Family Matters. Fans point to similarities in VelJohnson's character traits across these roles, particularly his talkative nature, his caring personality, and his tendency to get involved in unusual situations that are beyond normal police work. The theory gained additional support when Vel Johnson appeared as Al Powell again in the television series Chuck, suggesting that the character continued his law enforcement career after the events of Die Hard. Some fans even incorporate his role as Detective David Sutton in Turner and Hooch into this timeline, creating a complex career path for a single fictional police officer. While Vel Johnson has acknowledged this fan theory with humor and appreciation, he has explained that his frequent casting as police officers simply reflects Hollywood's tendency to typecast actors in roles that suit their appearance and personality. The actor has stated that he enjoys playing law enforcement characters and takes pride in portraying police officers in a positive light, even if each role was intended to be a completely separate character. Fact 7. The show became pure science fiction. What started as a wholesome family sitcom about the Winslow family's everyday life gradually transformed into one of the most science fiction-heavy shows on television, all because of Steve Urkel's increasingly outlandish inventions that defied the laws of physics and common sense. As Family Matters progressed through its 9 seasons, the show abandoned realistic storylines in favor of plots that belonged more in Star Trek than in a Friday night family comedy. Steve's scientific genius led to the creation of devices that would make even the most advanced laboratories jealous, including transformation chambers that could alter human DNA, cloning machines that created perfect duplicates of people, and teleportation devices that could instantly transport objects and people across continents. The show featured episodes where Steve built a time machine wristwatch that allowed him and Carl to travel back in time, though their meddling with the past predictably created chaos in the present day. One of the most ambitious storylines involved Steve's invention of the Urkel, a teleportation device that accidentally sent Carl to Paris when he walked into its beam while Steve was trying to transport a piece of cheese. This led to a 3-part vacation storyline where the entire Winslow family used the teleportation technology to travel to France for free, treating interdimensional travel as casually as taking a city bus. The show's science fiction elements reached their peak during the series finale, when Steve's latest invention caused a satellite to crash into a space shuttle, forcing him to travel into orbit to fix the problem personally. This storyline literally put Steve Urkel in space, completing the show's journey from domestic comedy to full-blown science fiction adventure series. Throughout these increasingly bizarre plot lines, the Winslow family treated Steve's reality-bending inventions as minor inconveniences rather than world-changing scientific breakthroughs. Carl would complain about being shrunk to 2 inches tall or accidentally transformed into Steve's duplicate, but the family never seemed to consider the massive implications of having a teenage neighbor who had essentially solved some of the greatest challenges in physics and engineering. The show's writers embraced the absurdity completely, creating storylines that ignored scientific possibility in favor of entertainment value and physical comedy. Fact 8. 2 different actresses played Harriet. The final season of Family Matters featured a dramatic behind-the-scenes change that most viewers never noticed, as actress Jo Marie Payton, who had played matriarch Harriet Winslow for 8.5 seasons, left the show midway through season 9 and was quietly replaced by actress Judian Elder for the remaining episodes. This casting change happened because of escalating tensions between Payton and Jaleel White that reached a breaking point during filming. Jo Marie Payton had been reluctant to continue with Family Matters when CBS picked up the show for its 9th season in 1997, feeling that the series had already jumped the shark years earlier when it shifted focus from family storylines to Steve Urkel's increasingly outlandish adventures. Her contract had expired, but she agreed to stay with the show to maintain continuity for the fans and her fellow cast members. The situation came to a head during the filming of what would become Payton's final regular episode, when White was playing a gangster character instead of his usual Steve Urkel persona, and attempted to insert material into the script that violated television broadcast standards and practices. Peyton objected to the inappropriate content, leading to a heated argument between the two actors that nearly escalated into a physical confrontation. The dispute became so intense that fellow cast member Darius McCrary, who played Eddie Winslow, had to physically step between Peyton and White to prevent the situation from becoming violent. This incident marked the end of Peyton's willingness to continue working on the show, and she made the decision to leave Family Matters permanently. Judian Elder was brought in to complete Harriet's storylines for the rest of Season 9, taking over the role without any acknowledgement within the show that a different actress was now playing the character. Elder had previous experience in television, having appeared on shows like A Different World and In the Heat of the Night, but she faced the challenging task of stepping into a beloved character that another actress had defined for nearly a decade. The transition happened so late in the show's run that many viewers didn't realize a different actress was playing Harriet Winslow, especially since Family Matters ended just a few months after Elder took over the role. Fact 9. Steve Urkel created 8 different characters. While most viewers remember Jaleel White primarily as the suspender-wearing Steve Urkel, the versatile actor actually portrayed a total of 8 distinct characters throughout Family Matters' 9-season run, showcasing his range and ability to completely transform his voice, mannerisms, and personality for each role. This impressive character count made White one of the most prolific performers on the show, often appearing as multiple characters within the same episode. The most famous of White's alternate characters was Stefan Urkel, Steve's suave and confident alter ego, who emerged from the transformation chamber speaking in White's natural voice and wearing stylish clothing instead of Urkel's trademark suspenders and glasses. Stefan became so popular that he eventually became a permanent character when Steve cloned himself and transformed the duplicate into Stefan permanently. White also played Myrtle Urkel, Steve's Southern Belle cousin who visited Chicago, and immediately developed a crush on Eddie Winslow, much to his dismay. This character required White to perform in drag, complete with a feminine voice and flirtatious behavior that made the role particularly challenging and comedic. White later admitted that playing Myrtle was emotionally difficult for him, and he cried after filming some of those episodes because the character pushed him so far outside his comfort zone. The extended Urkel family tree allowed White to portray several other relatives, including Cornelius Eugene Urkel, another nerdy cousin who shared Steve's scientific interests and awkward social skills. White also played various versions of Steve from different time periods and alternate realities, including an elderly version of Steve and even evil duplicates created by malfunctioning cloning experiments. One of the most unusual characters White portrayed was Stevel, a ventriloquist dummy that came to life during a Halloween episode and terrorized the Winslow family. This role required White to provide the voice for the possessed dummy while also appearing as regular Steve Urkel in the same scenes, creating a technical challenge for both the actor and the production team. Each of these characters required White to develop unique vocal patterns, physical comedy styles, and personality traits, demonstrating his acting abilities far beyond the iconic Steve Urkel character that made him famous, and proving his versatility as a performer throughout the series. Fact 10. A demonic ventriloquist dummy episode existed. One of the most unexpectedly terrifying episodes in Family Matters history aired on October 25, 1996, when the typically wholesome sitcom transformed into a supernatural horror story featuring a possessed ventriloquist dummy that terrorized the Winslow family. The Halloween episode, titled Stevel, marked a dramatic departure from the show's usual lighthearted tone, creating scenes that were genuinely frightening enough to scare both children and adults watching at home. The episode began innocently enough when Steve Urkel showed the Winslow family his new ventriloquist dummy, which looked exactly like him, complete with glasses, suspenders, and an eerily realistic face. The family found the dummy creepy and unfunny when Steve attempted to perform his ventriloquist act, with Eddie openly agreeing that Steve was indeed the world's worst ventriloquist, as Steve had claimed. The horror began that night during a thunderstorm when a bolt of lightning struck through Steve's bedroom window and hit the dummy while Steve was sleeping. The electrical surge brought the dummy to life with a malevolent personality that was the complete opposite of Steve's well-meaning but bumbling character. The possessed dummy, which Steve had named Stevel, began moving on its own and developing an evil intelligence that delighted in causing chaos and fear. Stevel proceeded to terrorize the entire Winslow household, manipulating family members and turning them against each other through supernatural influence. The dummy controlled Carl's actions, forced Eddie to attack Steve with a blender while shouting, "This is really gonna hurt!" and even trapped Laura inside a kitchen cupboard. The episode featured genuinely creepy moments that would not have been out of place in a horror movie, including scenes where the dummy's eyes would glow and its head would turn independently. The episode drew clear inspiration from classic horror stories, particularly the Twilight Zone episodes, The Dummy, and It's a Good Life, creating an atmosphere of dread that was completely unprecedented for Family Matters. The episode ended with the revelation that the entire experience had been Steve's nightmare. Though this twist ending didn't diminish the genuine scares that the episode provided. The popularity of Stevel led to a sequel episode in Season 9 titled Stevel 2. This time, he's not alone. Fact 11. The cast resented Steve Urkel's popularity. The meteoric rise of Steve Urkel from guest character to the undisputed star of Family Matters created significant behind-the-scenes tension that made the early years of filming extremely difficult for everyone involved, as the original cast members struggled to accept that their family sitcom had been completely transformed by a 12-year-old actor playing an annoying neighbor. What had been designed as an ensemble show focusing on the Winslow family suddenly became The Steve Urkel Show, leaving the established cast feeling displaced and overshadowed. Jaleel White openly acknowledged this tension in a 2011 interview with Vanity Fair, admitting that the early years on set were particularly challenging. "Things were definitely strained in the early going," White explained. "There's no sense in hiding that. There was a division between myself and the rest of the cast, but over 9 years and 215 episodes, obviously relationships get better. The resentment was understandable from the original cast's perspective, as actors like Reginald Vell Johnson, Jo Marie Payton, Darius McCrary, and Kelly Shanique Williams had developed their characters and established the show's foundation, only to watch a guest star receive the majority of screen time, storylines, and fan attention. The shift in focus meant that episodes increasingly revolved around Steve's inventions and romantic pursuit of Laura, while other family members became supporting players in their own show. The situation was particularly difficult because White was still a child when he joined the cast, making the professional dynamics even more complicated as adult actors had to navigate their frustration with a young performer who was simply doing his job exceptionally well. The cast members had to watch as Steve Urkel became a cultural phenomenon with merchandise, catchphrases, and media attention that completely overshadowed their contributions to the show. Despite these early challenges, White emphasized that relationships gradually improved over the show's long run, and he maintained friendships with several cast members even after Family Matters ended. The success of the show ultimately benefited everyone involved, as the series ran for 9 seasons and provided steady employment for the entire cast, even though the journey to that success required working through years of professional and personal tensions that tested everyone's patience and professionalism. Fact 12. Jaleel White nearly played Rudy on The Cosby Show. Before Jaleel White became famous as the suspender-wearing Steve Urkel, he came extremely close to landing one of the most coveted child roles on television as Rudy Huxtable on The Cosby Show, a character that was originally conceived as a boy before the producers made a last-minute decision to change the role to a girl. This casting near miss would have completely altered the trajectory of both White's career and television history, as his involvement with The Cosby Show would have prevented him from ever appearing on Family Matters. White was already well into the audition process for The Cosby Show when the character of Rudy was still planned to be the youngest son of the Huxtable family rather than the youngest daughter. The auditions had progressed to the point where White was seriously being considered for the role, competing against other young actors for what everyone knew would be a career-defining opportunity on one of television's most popular sitcoms. However, the show's creators and producers ultimately decided to change Rudy from a male character to a female character, effectively eliminating White from consideration, regardless of how well he had performed during his auditions. This gender switch led to the casting of Kesha Knight Pulliam, who was just 4 years old when she began playing Rudy Huxtable, and became one of the youngest Emmy Award nominees in history for her performance. White learned about this casting decision change during the audition process, discovering that his opportunity to join The Cosby Show had disappeared not because of his acting ability or screen presence, but simply because the character he was auditioning for no longer existed in male form. This disappointment could have been devastating for a young actor, but it ultimately opened the door for White to pursue other opportunities. If White had successfully landed the role of Rudy, as originally conceived, he would have been committed to The Cosby Show for multiple seasons and would never have been available to audition for the guest appearance on Family Matters that launched his career as Steve Urkel. The character change that initially seemed like a setback actually allowed White to become one of the most recognizable television characters of the 1990s, proving that sometimes losing one opportunity creates space for an even better one. Fact 13. The show dropped its theme song entirely. In a highly unusual move for a popular sitcom, Family Matters completely eliminated its opening theme song starting with Season 7 in 1995, abandoning the familiar "As Days Go By" melody that had introduced episodes for 6 years. This decision made Family Matters one of the few long-running television series to deliberately remove its theme song, while the show was still actively producing new episodes. The change represented a significant shift in how the show presented itself to viewers, as opening theme songs had traditionally served as an important branding element that helped establish the tone and identity of television programs. As Days Go By had become closely associated with Family Matters, featuring lyrics about family love and togetherness that perfectly matched the show's original wholesome concept, making its removal all the more surprising to longtime fans. Instead of the traditional opening credits sequence that showed the cast members' names alongside clips from the show while the theme song played, Family Matters began each episode by immediately jumping into the story and displaying the credits as text overlays during the first few minutes of the actual episode content. This approach gave the show more time for storytelling by eliminating the minute or so that would normally be devoted to the opening theme and credit sequence. The decision to remove the theme song appeared to be part of the show's broader evolution during its later seasons, as the series had already moved away from its original family-focused concept toward increasingly science fiction-oriented storylines centered around Steve Urkel's inventions. By Season 7, the show bore little resemblance to the wholesome family sitcom that, As Days Go By, had been written to introduce, making the upbeat song about family values seem somewhat disconnected from episodes featuring time travel, cloning, and space adventures. Interestingly, the show did briefly return to using As Days Go By for just 2 episodes during Season 7, Talks Cheap, and Fa La 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 Lag. But these were exceptions rather than a permanent return to the original format. For the final 3 seasons of Family Matters, viewers had to rely on their memories of the catchy theme song that had once been such an integral part of the Family Matters viewing experience. Fact 14. Urkel had his own breakfast cereal. At the peak of Steve Urkel's cultural dominance in the early 1990s, the character's popularity reached such extraordinary heights that he was given his own breakfast cereal called Urkel O's, making him one of the few television characters to achieve the ultimate merchandising milestone of having a breakfast product named after him. This cereal represented the pinnacle of Urkel mania, a time when Steve's catchphrases, dance moves, and distinctive appearance had transformed him from a one-episode guest character into a genuine pop culture phenomenon. Urkel O's were marketed as a fun breakfast option for children who couldn't get enough of the suspender-wearing nerd, featuring cereal pieces that were likely designed to appeal to young fans of the show who wanted to start their day with a reminder of their favorite Friday night television character. The cereal joined a growing collection of Steve Urkel merchandise that capitalized on the character's incredible popularity during Family Matters' most successful years. In addition to the breakfast cereal, Steve Urkel was also immortalized in toy form with an official Urkel doll that allowed children to bring the character home and recreate their favorite moments from the show. The doll likely featured Steve's signature outfit, complete with suspenders, glasses, and high-water pants, giving fans a physical representation of the character that they could play with between episodes of Family Matters. The existence of both Urkel O's cereal and the official Urkel doll demonstrated just how far Steve's influence had extended beyond television, reaching into grocery stores and toy aisles across America. This level of merchandising was typically reserved for major cartoon characters, movie franchises, or long-established television icons, making it remarkable that a character who had been created for a single episode appearance could generate enough consumer demand to justify multiple product lines. The Steve Urkel merchandise phenomenon reflected the broader impact that Family Matters was having on American popular culture during the early to mid-1990s, when the show was a ratings powerhouse, and Steve Urkel had become a household name. The fact that parents were willing to buy Urkel-branded products for their children showed that the character had successfully crossed over from television entertainment into the broader consumer marketplace, achieving a level of commercial success that few fictional characters ever reach. Fact 15. Michelle Thomas was fighting cancer during filming. Behind the scenes of Family Matters' final seasons, actress Michelle Thomas was courageously battling a serious illness while continuing to portray Myra Monkhouse, Steve Urkel's devoted girlfriend, who many fans considered the perfect match for the nerdy character. Thomas had been diagnosed with stomach cancer in 1997, during what would become the show's final years, but she kept her condition private while continuing to work on the series that had helped establish her acting career. Michelle Thomas brought warmth and intelligence to the character of Myra, creating a believable romantic interest for Steve, who genuinely appreciated his quirky personality and scientific genius rather than being annoyed by his awkward behavior like most other characters on the show. Her portrayal of the sweet, patient girlfriend who truly loved Steve for who he was made Myra a fan favorite, with many viewers preferring her to Laura Winslow as Steve's romantic partner. As Thomas's cancer progressed, it became increasingly difficult for her to maintain the demanding schedule of television production, which required long days of filming, memorizing lines, and performing the physical demands of acting in a sitcom. Despite these challenges, she continued working on Family Matters as long as her health permitted, demonstrating remarkable professionalism and dedication to her craft even while facing such a serious personal battle. Thomas eventually had to leave the series before Family Matters concluded its 9-season run, as her illness made it impossible for her to continue working. Her departure from the show meant that the character of Myra simply disappeared from the storyline, leaving Steve's romantic life unresolved as the series focused on his relationship with Laura Winslow in the final episodes. Tragically, Michelle Thomas passed away on December 22, 1998, just months after Family Matters aired its final episode in July of that same year. She was only 30 years old at the time of her death, cutting short a promising acting career that had included appearances on The Cosby Show and other television programs, in addition to her memorable role on Family Matters. Jaleel White has since honored Thomas's memory by keeping a memorial dedicated to her in his home, acknowledging the important role she played in his life and career during their time working together on the show.